Test, test. Thanks for coming, everybody. Just want to let you know that there's more space up front here if you're interested. We're going to wait about 5 minutes. I know people are still arriving. Appreciate your patience. Special shout out to the VIP section. Glad you all could make it. Thanks for being a part of this extended community experience. Okay, welcome everyone. I am Deacon Kyle Soderberg from Nativity Lutheran Church, just down the road in St. Anthony Village. And we are so very excited to have you here with us today for this extended community collaboration, and also very more than excited to be welcoming Governor Martin Schreiber to this very meaningful author talk. As collaborators on this event, we are joined by volunteers from Nativity Lutheran, including our mental health ministry team, and our very generous volunteer AV professionals. Start by getting all of them a round of applause quick to warm us up. That'd be great. Thank you. As co-collaborators, we're also welcomed by other members of Bethlehem Lutheran on Lindo Avenue South in Minneapolis. And just a reference that this presentation is close to all of our hearts as a ministry of our faith communities, because we care deeply about caregiving, mental health, and self-care. This commitment of ours is reflected in our church's belonging to our third faith-based collaborator today, Mental Health Connect, which also have representatives from. Mental Health Connect is a collaborative of over 40 faith communities working to reduce the stigma of mental illness through education and awareness. And Governor Schreiber's presentation will help us take one step further toward this important mission. But obviously, this is a community event that is not only being supported by faith communities. Two of our other generous sponsors here today are the Alzheimer's Association and our gracious host, The Legacy. Give them all a round of applause, too. I know it's a big topic, but we can have some fun along the way. So now we're just going to take a few minutes to hear from those other two hosts of ours today. First, let me introduce you to Heidi Haley Franklin, who is the Vice President of Programs for the Alzheimer's Association of Minnesota and North Dakota. Here comes Heidi. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. Thanks everyone for being here. We're just very thrilled, and I'm so excited to hear Governor Schreiber tell his story. And for those of you that may not know, the Alzheimer's Association has many no-cost programs and services that can help support you, your family, care partners, caregivers, whoever might be concerned about Alzheimer's or any other kinds of dementia. We do have a table in the back. I'll stick around after the talk today, so if you do have questions, feel free to stop by and say hi. All right. Who is next?
Thank you. Yeah, please feel free. Awesome. Okay, well, that was short and sweet, but impactful. And now we're going to take a couple minutes to hear from Mary Farnham, the Life Enrichment Coordinator of this lovely care facility. We're going to give it a second because Mary is usually in 1,000 places at one time. Told you, right on cue.
It's kind of a Lenny and Squiggy moment. Do you know who Lenny and Squiggy are? Sure. Anyways, so my name is Mary Farnham. I have been doing the activity director thing for, 45 years, almost 3 here. Because of my background as an occupational therapy assistant, I'm kind of well-versed about memory cares and that kind of thing. So the one thing I would like to interject into this program is the word change. When we work with people who have Alzheimer's disease or any people, change is kind of one of those things it's a little bit of a dirty word, right? It's hard. So I'm going to tell all of you that you are part of history making change today, not only by celebrating our community, but as of June 1st, we will no longer be known as the Legacy of St. Anthony. We are going to change to be a facility called Valor Senior Living. And our guiding light will be Life Spark. So, change for us, change for a different name. We'll all get through it because our administrator, LaFawn Kibble, is quite the leader. She'll keep us grounded, and we'll have the expertise of other people. So change, love it or hate it, you gotta embrace it. In fact, our Protestant communion volunteer, he said, when you go into change, you gotta go into it with your legs bent because you're gonna hit a lot of road bumps along the way and you gotta brace for it. So I'm gonna say, namaste, my spirit honors your spirit, and I'm gonna turn the microphone over. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. All right, now the introduction you all have been waiting for, myself included. So again, we are so very honored to have us with today Governor Martin Schreiber from our neighboring state of Wisconsin. He has served in various political roles since 1962. Recently, he has retired from his public affairs firm and is now an advocate for his passion, as expressed here today, supporting Alzheimer's caregivers. He is committed to speaking out to help all caregivers and their loved ones so we can all live our best lives. Governor Schreiber is also the author of My Two Elaines, and we have copies of his book for sale in the back for $15 each, and he let us know that he'd be more than happy to sign those after his presentation here today. Lisa, another volunteer of both Nativity and Mental Health Connect, will support you in getting your copy. Now everyone, please join me in welcoming the biggest and warmest offering possible to Governor Martin Schreiber.
Hi, everybody. Hi. Well, I don't know why you're here, but they told me I would be auditioning for the Golden Bachelor. We're not? Anyway, all you great Minnesota people, you Minneapolis people. First, am I coming through okay back there? Okay. You're doing okay here in front? Do you want to trade places with the people in back who can't hear? Okay. Well, anyway, is this micro? Okay, we're all set here. So why don't you, Kyle? Kyle, thank you for the introduction. I appreciate that. And just so much appreciation to the church community for their putting this all together. This whole issue of mental health, this whole issue of Alzheimer's, dementia, much too much of a problem than what we would have hoped to have had. And so, the fact that we can be here together is something that is very special. This is my second time now giving a presentation in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I'll be coming back again in June at the University of Minnesota. But, we're here today, and this is now a little over the number 800 presentations that I've made over the course of time since the book. And I want you to know that in this course of time, there are two things that I am doing now that I didn't do in the beginning. Number one, I now stay awake during my entire presentation. What happened is I was giving the presentation and I was listening to myself and I said, hey, there may be something of interest here. But then the other thing that I do, which is really good, and that is it's added days, hours onto my life. And that is, if I give a talk, a presentation, and the room becomes empty, I stop talking and I just go home. And it just has saved me so much time. And but I'm glad to be with you here today. And drove up this morning from Stevens Point, Wisconsin. It's sort of in the middle of the state. My grandson Jordan is putting up with me. He's my bodyguard, my security agent, my advisor, my counselor. Everything that you could want in a grandson. So Jordan, publicly, thank you very much. And so we heard from Heidi from the Alzheimer's Association, just a terrific organization. Helped me a lot through what I went through. And then Mary was so helpful in everything, rearranging and helping with things. And of course, the church group, Gail, who was the person directly responsible for helping arrange this, is still surviving through it all. So Gail, thank you for that. And so here we are to talk about dementia, about Alzheimer's. And do I come through better when I'm down like this? If there's anything I hate as a speaker, I can't hear. Anyway, so we're here today to talk about Alzheimer's, about dementia. My first experience with dementia goes back to 1978 when I was running for governor. I was in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and I gave a talk, and after the talk was over, this elderly gentleman came rushing up to me, and he actually pounded. He said, "Governor," he said, "that had to be the world's most god-awful speech I've ever heard." Well, his wife was there, and she saw that, and she was embarrassed. Oh, she came rushing over. She said, "Governor, please excuse my husband. He's old and he's senile, and all he does is just repeat whatever he hears everybody else say." So here we are together. I want to tell you a little bit about my two Elaines. So what happened was I'm going through this whole Elaine, if we go back to when she was like 63 years of age, probably about 25 years ago now, so she started showing signs of early dementia. And we got a diagnosis, and what happened was I didn't know the first thing about it. And I didn't know the first thing about a lot of the things. 25 years ago when she was first diagnosed, Alzheimer's could not be cured or prevented. Today, Alzheimer's cannot be cured or prevented. And so one of the most important things that we can do is to understand that we can't fight this disease head on. And to get this prognosis of Alzheimer's is so dire that we may want to think of absolute hopelessness. Well, the fact of the matter is there is something that we can do which is meaningful and productive and also, I think, comforting. And that is that we can make the determination that we are going to help our loved one live their best life possible. That is doable. And we're going to be touching on that. So that's doable. Also, what comes along with that, not only helping our loved one live their best life possible, but that is impossible to do unless we as caregivers live our best lives possible. So please understand that. But anyway, so as I'm going on this journey, I made the conclusion that if there's one thing worse than Alzheimer's, it's ignorance of the disease. Ignorance of the disease by the medical profession, who does not understand that if there is a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, there's two patients. There's the person who is ill and the caregiver. Caregivers, please understand that as a caregiver, you have a 40% chance of dying before your loved one due to stress-related illness. 40% greater chance. If you are a caregiver versus a non-caregiver, your mortality rate is 60% higher. So please understand that, because that has a bearing on the things that we want to visit and talk about today. So I realize that if Alzheimer's is bad, ignorance of the disease is worse. Medical profession doesn't understand there's two patients. Others don't understand what this whole issue is about. And so I decided then that I wanted to do something about it and help people better learn, cope, and survive. And because of that, I wrote my Two Elaines. The first Elaine, that was the girl that I fell in love with at 14 years of age in Latin class at Lutheran High School in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She was my friend right from the very beginning, the person who I wanted as my wife. And so we dated, and we went steady, and we got married, and 4 children, and 13 grandchildren, now 10 great-grandchildren. But she was my advisor, my companion, my life's partner, everything that you could ever want. Her greatest legacy to me, she would be the hardest working campaigner, but if I would lose, she would never let me feel defeated. And it's our determination, yours and mine. Yes, we may lose, but we're not going to let ourselves feel defeated. How are we going to do that? We are going to set a goal, a realizable goal, and that's to help our loved one live their best life possible. So I'm not finding answers about how best to learn, cope, and survive. So I decided I want to try and write a book. So I wrote a book, and it's my Two Elaines. I told you about the first Elaine, but the second Elaine began to appear when she was about 63 years of age, going to and from places she had been going to and from for the last 10 years. The second Elaine began to appear when, as a great cook, she would mess up her recipe so badly that she would cry. That was the beginning of the second Elaine. And so as things progressed, it was getting extremely tough to be the kind of loving husband I used to be. Elaine, it didn't happen on a Thursday, it happened on a Friday. Elaine, it wasn't the Smiths, it was the Joneses. Elaine, you asked me 5 times in a row what time are we leaving. I told you, Elaine, why did you put the car keys in the dish? What I didn't understand was I needed to join the world of this person who now is. As long as I would try and keep Elaine in my world, there would be so much additional worry and anxiety that she would have. Increased worry and anxiety and frustration on my part as well. So the answer is to join their world. How do we do that? Well, Elaine once asked me, how are my parents? Oh, I said, Elaine, they're both dead. No, they're not, she said. I said, Elaine, they're both dead. When she realized she didn't say goodbye to her parents, much less attend the funeral, and I saw that look on her face, I promised myself I'm never going to put her through that again. So the next time she asked me, how are my parents? Oh, I said, they're great. I said, your mom likes working at church. Your dad likes his, oh, she said, that makes me feel so good. That makes me feel so good. Well, that's what I call therapeutic fibbing. Therapeutic fibbing. Two things about therapeutic fibbing. Number one, I tried it the first year of marriage. The second thing about therapeutic fibbing, and I want you to know that not everyone believes me on this. Even people from Wisconsin don't believe me on this. But I'm going to tell you what happened. You know the story about Moses and the Ten Commandments, Mount Sinai? Well, I was there, and Moses and I are on top of the Mount Sinai. First of all, so we got to get these tablets down. I said, one thing you have to, Moses does not like to be called Mo, okay? So I said, Moses, how are we going to get these great big tablets of stone down to the bottom? Well, he says, we're going to do it together. So Moses and I worked really hard. We finally get to the bottom of the mountain, and here I look, and here on these tablets of stone in Arabic Hebrew are the 10 Commandments. Well, I wasn't yet confirmed to know exactly what every single commandment meant, but I knew that there was something in there that we got to pay attention to. But I was still confused. So what happened was I walked around the back and I looked at the back side of these tablets. And here, believe it or not, written in the words, therapeutic fibbing is good. Therapeutic fibbing is advisable. Don't pay attention to what it says on the other side about telling a lie or a fib, because therapeutic fibbing is important if you are a caregiver. And so if you can understand that. So joining Elaine's world, 9:30 in the morning, glass of wine. No, you can't have that's not the answer. The answer is, do you want red wine or white wine? Do you want to drink it in a large glass or in a smaller glass? Should we invite your sisters over to have a glass? And let's have a cup of coffee while we read direction. We have to understand we cannot fight this disease head on. It is impossible to win an argument with this disease. All right, so now I'm beginning to understand more about what should be happening. And in the meantime, I am seeing good friends who unfortunately are going through the same experience, and they're yelling at their loved one for having an extra cookie, or for taking and wanting an extra blanket. Foolish things that I can't believe that, but it's the utter frustration. And so I wanted to try and have people understand the importance of the world of the person who now is. So I wrote the book, My Two Elaines. And so this book here is what you call self-published. And in the self-published book, you hire your own proofreader, your own printer, your own graphics designer. And I want you to know that this book here, there are 90,000 of these books in print, and only 89,800 left in my garage. So, but this book here, people have told me, and you think, how are you doing? We're not paying enough attention to you over here, are we? But anyway, so this book here, I want you to know, people have picked up this book, and they started to read it, and they couldn't put it down. Has that ever happened? You picked up a book? Okay, I want to tell you how it happened in this instance. If we go back 3 years ago, I was running out of copies of this book. And so in running out of copies, I went to the printer. I said, I need more books. The printer not only got the books done on time, but he got the books done ahead of time. Now, do you see how shiny this is? That's like a lacquer, like a varnish. Well, he didn't let it dry, and it became sticky. And so people picked up the book, and they started to read it, and they wanted to put it down, and they couldn't put it down. So what happened was, so they had to hold the book like this, and they had to walk, which was very good advertising for the book. However, it was in January, and people wanted to go outside, and they had to put on their coat, and they couldn't get the book through the arm of their coat, so they had to drape the coat over their shoulder. We know how cold northern Wisconsin winters are, anyway, so they had to walk like this. And so now they're blaming me for 16 cases of frostbite because of going outside. I don't know whether it's 4 hands with 4 fingers on each hand, or whether it's 16 hands with 4 fingers on each hand, which is one of the things that an author who nobody knows about has to go through. But just so you understand it. So here's what happened. Harper Publishing saw this book, and they understood that it could be extremely helpful to people who are trying to cope with this disease of Alzheimer's. They told me the person who was excited about it told me, do you remember Dr. Spock? You'd never have a child growing up without Dr. Spock. But they told me at Harper's that this book would be as important to caregivers of Alzheimer's patients as Dr. Spock was for new babies. In other words, just simple understanding of the basics. And that makes such a big difference. So what I want you to know, however, is they first came out, and I didn't like it at all. They first came out with a hardcover book, $27.99. And if you're from Canada, it was $34.99. Is there anyone here from Canada? All right. But if you would be, you'd have to pay $34.99. But when you become our 51st state, you would get credit for what you would have paid had you been a regular American, and I would guarantee that. So anyway, so they did the publishing of this book, and they sold out whatever they printed, and then they came out with what we call a lawyer's signature, not a lawyer's, but an author's signature edition. The same stories in all of them. And so, except this one here, you think this one here has pictures, and this one here does not have pictures. This one here, $15, has both the pictures and the story. So you'll be able to, and I'm not trying to sell books. If we do make a profit, it goes to support caregiver organizations, and it makes a hopefully we can help a little bit in that way. Now, what I want you, so here's, I told you that Alzheimer's couldn't be cured or prevented. In Elaine's instance, well, first of all, she spent roughly 8 years with me at home, and then finally my children had intervention. And they say, Dad, if you don't do something, you're before Mom. And we don't want to lose both parents. But anyway, so she was there 8.5 years in assisted living. And when she went into assisted living, I would try and have lunch with her as much as possible, many times in the cafeteria. And so what happened, we're having lunch there one time, and she looks at me, and she begins to tell me very loudly how intelligent and how good-looking I am. Well, anyway, she's telling how intelligent and how good-looking I am, and there happened to be a doctor sitting right over here. And they heard her tell me how intelligent and good-looking I am, and they looked at me and they said, she's right. And so they wrote an article for the New England Medical Journal. Elaine Schreiber is getting better because she knows her husband is intelligent and good-looking. They're no dummies at the New England Medical Journal. They wrote back and they said, look, you have to show 3 things where someone is getting better. You only show 2 things. So they sent back the article. A little bit of time went by. Oh, maybe, I don't know, 3, 4 weeks, a little bit of time went by. And now Elaine and I happen to be sitting at the same table, and the same doctor and nurse sitting there by happenstance. And she looks at me and she said, how did we meet? How did we meet? Elaine, when we were freshmen in high school, sitting next to each other in Latin class. I fell in love with you right away. I said, I knew I wanted you for the mother of my children. And I said, not only that, if any boy got within 50 feet of you, I popped him on the head. Well, she looked at me and she said, you're a bullshitter. Well, now they have the 3 things, okay, to show that she is getting better. And so, but one thing that actually did happen, so we were having lunch. And this is so important for us caregivers to understand, and also for friends of people who are people with Alzheimer's. That when it really struck me as being important after I thought about it. But in reality, what is happening, we're sitting having lunch, and Elaine looks at me, and she's beginning to cry. I said, Elaine, why are you crying? Well, she looked at me, she says, I'm beginning to love you more than my husband. Well, I didn't ask her what's wrong with your turkey husband. I didn't do that. But here's what that means. That means that it is not necessary for our loved one to know our name in order for hearts to touch. Hearts can touch by giving a hug, by holding a hand, by giving a smile, by singing a song, by just being together and watching the leaves roll across the lawn. Hearts can touch in that way. And sometimes, if Alzheimer's is bad, ignorance of the disease is worse. Sometimes what happens, because our neighbors and our friends are ignorant of the disease, they don't know how to act. They don't know what to do. And because of that, they stay away. And because they stay away, the life of a caregiver becomes even that much, well, you feel abandoned. You feel deserted. Friends of 25, 30, 40 years all of a sudden don't come by. Not because they mean, not because they mean ill will, they just simply don't understand the disease. So one of the things we caregivers have to do is understand to share this information with our friends so that they can understand and be helpful, so that they can understand that hearts can touch by just simply saying hello. And by the way, when I talk about hearts touching and neighbors and so forth, this disease is not what you call a chicken casserole disease. Hypothetically speaking, I have a bad heart. I'm laid up at home. You bring me chicken casserole. So maybe tuna casserole in Minnesota, I don't know, but chicken casserole in Wisconsin. But anyway, but if I break my hip and I fall, you bring me chicken casserole, tuna casserole, maybe both. But anyway, but if my wife is a person with Alzheimer's, people don't know what to do, and they don't bring chicken casserole. They don't bring anything. Why? Not because they're mean, but because they don't understand this disease. And so what happens when you become a caregiver, so there's my two Elaines, the woman with my loved one who was with me and did all the great things any human being could do in life together. And then there was Elaine, the person with Alzheimer's. There's also two Martys. The Marty who was the husband, and then the caregiver Marty who morphed into being a caregiver. And I want you to know, my friends, that there is a difference between a husband and being a caregiver. A husband not necessarily lies to his loved one. A husband not necessarily is afraid to talk about things to friends and so forth. And so we have to understand that you're going to be changing roles, and we have to understand that through this period of time, you're going to be changing. One thing that we don't realize also, I had a friend, retired, things are going good. He gets a massive heart attack and dies. Instantaneously gone. And so there was a funeral, and not only a funeral, but people could come by and express their condolences, their sympathy, and there was closure. There was closure. A caregiver never gets closure. A caregiver sees a little bit of their loved one passing away every day, no closure. So we caregivers have to understand that in addition to all of the emotions and feelings that we are experiencing, among those is the matter of grieving. And to be able to look at that squarely and understand that this is something that, because we are aware of it, we are better able to handle it. So my children have this intervention. And by the grace of God, by the way, I'm going to counseling with the Alzheimer's Association. So helpful to me. So I go to the counselor, and she says, now what's wrong? I said, I just cannot see putting Elaine into a home. She said, you are not putting Elaine anyplace. You are giving her an opportunity to be who she is now. Can Marty Schreiber's 24/7 nursing home take care of her? Absolutely not. I was sleeping by the door at night for fear she would go out. It was because of lack of sleep and improper diet and maybe too much liquor. I was becoming irrationally irritable. I was no use. So anyway, so I'm with the counselor. I can't see putting Elaine I can't see putting Elaine. And she said, you're not giving her a chance to be who she is now. Well, that hit me like you would hit me aside the head. My wanting to keep Elaine at home, I realized, was more of my own ego than it was the question, what is going to be best for my loved one? The question is, how do I help my loved one live the best life possible? By helping her be able to live in her world. And by doing that, it was necessary for assisted living memory care to come into play. One of the things I want to share also let's assume hypothetically, okay, a hypothetical that I win the lottery and I have enough money in that lottery to take each and every one of you on a Caribbean, well, not a Caribbean cruise, on a Gulf of Mexico, America. We're going to go in the Caribbean. We're going to go on this cruise, on this ship. And so we're all there together, and we're having a great time. And we're doing the calypso, and we're drinking rum and Coke, and we're drinking all kinds. It's really great. Now, one of you falls overboard. Oh, we're going to save you. We're going to throw you a lifeline. And you grab the lifeline. You're saved. Oh, no, you're not saved, because the lifeline breaks. Well, why does the lifeline break? Because it was gnawed at. So here, our goal is to help our loved one live their best life possible, which is doable, in exchange for not being able to do anything with Alzheimer's. So we want to help our loved one live their best life possible. And I should mention, and this is directly related, that before I go to print with this book, I find a series of notes and journals that Elaine had been keeping since her diagnosis. And I want you to know that we had prayed together and we had cried together. But never did I understand the courage that it takes to be diagnosed with this disease and go forward. Never did I understand that. But also never did I understand how important I was as her lifeline. I mean, she's worried about what the future is going to be. She's aware she's going to be losing her memory, and now she gets criticized for everything that she does, and she doesn't even remember saying it. But I went through those notes with my two daughters, Kathy and Christine, and we selected for the book. Each chapter begins with some of Elaine's notes. And what that does is give us an insight into the mind of a person with Alzheimer's, and what is going through their mind. And she says in there any number of times, and this is not for self-aggrandizement that it's in there, but it's put in there to drive home the fact that caregivers, that they are a lifeline to their loved one. Remember, we want to help our loved one live their best life possible. In order for that to happen, we too have to live our best life possible. So the caregiver has to take care of themselves. And sometimes we gnaw at that lifeline by not getting enough sleep, by not eating right, by not getting enough socialization, by doing all of the things that you should be doing to have a good, healthy life. So if we can understand that, that also can make a difference. Also, what we caregivers have to understand is that we know that our loved one depends on us. But way down deep, we also know that they realize we have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, that also that they want us to keep ourselves healthy, so that there is that opportunity for us to carry on and to continue sharing with other people the wonderful lessons and memories that they gave us. And so if we could understand that, that would be really sort of good. Also, we are together here today. I understand it's the 17th of May. So here we are on the 17th of May. Pardon? 18th? 17th? 18th of May. Okay. So anyway, so here we are, the 18th of May. This disease takes us to places we never thought we would be. In my wildest dreams, I think I would be with you here on the 18th of May. Never, ever, ever. And that reminds me of being at places you never thought you would be. I was elected to the Wisconsin State Senate going back to 1962. And one of my responsibilities was a member of the State Senate Education Committee. As a responsible member of that committee, I had to go to Washington, D.C. for a meeting. If you take a 5:30 in the morning airplane out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, what happens is you can go to Washington, D.C., have your meeting, come back the same day, which I was in the process of doing. 5 o'clock in the morning, we're boarding the airplane. In front of me is this very important, distinguished-looking gentleman, and he looks at, and he goes to the flight attendant, does this airplane stop in Detroit? Oh, yes, sir. She said, we stop in Detroit. People get off the airplane. People get on the airplane. We go on to Washington, D.C. He says, I have to get off in Detroit. She said, fine. No, he said, I have to get off. She says, yes. He says, look, I'm inclined to fall asleep. And if I fall asleep, I might miss getting off the airplane, and I'm going to miss one of the most important meetings I could ever hope to have. will you help me get off this airplane? She says, yes. He says, do you she says, she says, I promise I will get you off of this airplane in Detroit. Now we land in Washington, D.C. And here this distinguished looking gentleman gets the airplane. As he gets off of the airplane, he goes to the flight attendant and he berates her like I've never heard anyone berated before in my whole life. It was horrible. It just went on and on. And finally he left. I felt sorry for the flight attendant. And I walked up and I said, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. That man certainly was angry. That man certainly was angry. She said, he was angry. You should have seen the fellow I put off in Detroit. So I want you to know, caregivers, it's one of the toughest jobs in the world. As we said, 40% of us caregivers die before a loved one due to stress-related illness. One of the things that has to be realized also, that is to ask for help means you're not giving up. If we're surrounded by an enemy, and if surrounded by an enemy, we know that things are almost impossible. To not go for help, that's ridiculous. You go for help because it means you're not giving up. And so it is an act of courage to go for help. And we have to understand that as well. And as I said, there's a difference between being the first Marty, the husband, and the second Marty, the caregiver. The first Marty, the husband, probably would never want to ask for help. Caregiver, in helping the loved one live their best life possible, certainly should be doing that because it's so difficult to do it alone. And so what I think that maybe I might do, I'm going to read a few excerpts from Elaine's notes, and then I thought maybe I will talk about prayer, patience, and persistence, and then maybe if you want, we could open it up for some discussion. When we have the question and answer period, and then you ask a question, I will repeat it to make sure everyone else can hear the question. If you ask me a question that I don't know the answer to, I will rephrase your question. So there will be nothing you can ask me that I won't be able to respond to. And I want you to know that any of my answers, it's not medical. It's what I have lived. And to share what I have lived is what I can and help you through. But anyway, when Elaine was diagnosed early, she wrote a letter to what she said, my dear loved ones. And she writes, it wasn't until a few weeks ago that I really had to say, yes, I do have Alzheimer's. I had read of signs that indicate Alzheimer's, like getting overly upset for no reason and having trouble with names and directions. But I still didn't think it was a problem for me. But in hindsight, for too long, I've been getting lost driving, having trouble keeping days straight, and difficulties with names and schedules. I still felt I could handle it. It won't get worse. But this morning, I started reading about the mid-stage of Alzheimer's in hopes of preparing myself better and realized I'm not very far away. That is most scary, but I have to accept it. I did have a book like this here that I brought along, especially with that it's marked so I don't have to take your time. But there's one in here that I want to read to you because it gives a direct understanding of the challenges of their mind. So we read just about what she's understanding. She has Alzheimer's and she knows that it's getting worse. She's sort of worried. Also, there's notes that she writes about how important I am, that she needs me and she loves me, and, she wants me forever. Now here, listen to this. I am not enjoying my role anymore as Marty's wife. Because of his having concern about my Alzheimer's, he doesn't let me be me. He doesn't let me go for a walk if I want to, or to the store alone. I used to appreciate him, what I thought was concern. But he holds me captive much too much. I'm going to try to have a second opinion because I really don't think I have any problem. I know how to drive or walk any place I want to, but he doesn't believe me, and I hate the control he has placed on me. I don't even think I have Alzheimer's per se. And so I didn't understand what she was going through. And so I would argue with her. And so caregivers, we have to understand that there's a difference between being a loving spouse or son or daughter and being a caregiver. And being a caregiver, we adjust ourselves and we join their world. So the one that I love the most that she wrote, she writes, life is good. I plan to have it continue that way until my children tell me it's time for a nursing home or something like that. That is realistic with what my Alzheimer's book says about my future. But till then, I will try my best to be normal, whatever that means, and keep my happy side of life always continuing. I'm lucky to have such a good family and many friends to help me get through all this. And so another great day to thank the Lord and smile, smile, smile. So Elaine told me once, why worry when you can pray? And I think that has a lot to do with it too. Again, understand we can't beat this disease right now. We can determine a very realizable goal to help our loved one live their best life possible. To understand that if there's one thing worse than Alzheimer's, it's ignorance of the disease. The importance of joining their world. I'm here because I love you guys. I'm here because I know what it's like to be on this journey. And I'm here because if there can be something that I have learned that would help you on this journey, I would want to do that. So now let's just talk about prayer, patience, and persistence. I was told this story, so I don't know the accuracy. But anyway, this woman had this parrot, and all this parrot knew the words, Polly wants a party, Polly wants a party, that's all this parrot knew. So what happened was this woman that this lady is experiencing, her company's coming. She graduated with highest honors from the University of Minnesota. Anyway, so highest honors in the University of Minnesota, and her friends are coming to see her. What are they going to think of her? All her parrot knows is Polly wants a party, Polly wants. So she doesn't know what, she's so worried about their, so she goes to see her minister. She says, Pastor, help me. I've got this Polly wants a parrot. I have this, and all the parrot says is Polly wants a party. And my friend, what are they going to think? The minister said, this is a miracle. I myself have two parrots, Peter parrot and Paul parrot. He said, I've had them for 7 years. He says, all they do is pray. They pray every hour of every day of every week of every month of every, for 7 years they've been praying. Peter parrot and Paul parrot, they've been praying. What we should do is take your parrot, Polly, and put it in with my parrots, and my parrots will be a good influence on your parrot. And they agreed. And so the lady went home and got her parrot, brought it over to the minister's home, opened up the cage. They put, sure enough, Polly wants a party. Polly wants a party. Peter parrot looked at Paul parrot and said, our prayers have finally been answered. So why don't we open it up for thoughts or questions or ideas? Again, I want to thank the churches, Bethany and Nativity, for hosting this and putting this together, and also our guest Mary and her team, and also the Alzheimer's Association. And also thank all of you for Sunday afternoon off. I don't know, did I tell you I don't like golf? And this to be with you here is like playing golf, and hitting a couple holes in one, and like I'm a PGA kind of guy, and I just won the national. How much money, Jordan, does the PGA person win right now? Do you know offhand? How much? A lot. Okay, so anyway, so thanks for this opportunity. So anyway, yeah, Kyle.
Well, yeah. I'll run the microphone if anybody has a question, so just feel free to raise your hand.
One of the questions that we get most along the trail is, what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? That's a very important question to know the answer to. Dementia basically means the brain is not working right. Why is the brain not working right? Well, it could be because of a mix-up in medications. It could be because of depression. It could be because of an infection. It could be because of Alzheimer's. It could be because of Parkinson. It could be because of Lewy bodies. It could be because of a brain tumor, operable or not. But please understand, if you don't know where the car keys are, that's not a problem. If you find the car keys and you don't know what they're for, then you have to think about making sure you understand and take the next step further. So again, it's like cancer. Okay, what kind of cancers are there? Well, there's skin cancer, pancreatic cancer, so forth and so forth. The same thing with dementia. The umbrella and all different kinds of reasons why the brain is not working right. And we've got to make sure we get a proper analysis and diagnosis of that.
I'm assuming that as you were going through this, that you needed somebody to talk with on a regular basis. And the other assumption I'm making is that, I heard you mentioning Lutheran Church. Do you have anybody, particular layperson, who talked with you regularly, or somebody you could go to express what was going on?
I think the overall question was, how did I get through this, and who did I have to help me along the way? To be very forthright, I was ignorant. I thought I could do it all myself. I did, as I said, I eventually went to counseling with the Alzheimer's. That was very helpful. And I was sort of trying to keep it inside me. I wanted to keep it in my circle between me and I didn't necessarily want to go outside. I called up, I was feeling really down once, so I called up the psychiatrist. I called up and I said, hey, what about this? Well, he said, there are what they call support groups. Because I was ignorant, I thought a support group was a group of people sitting around in a circle saying, well, my spouse did this, ha, ha, ha. And the other one said, well, you should know what my spouse did, and so forth. So I didn't understand the importance of sharing and understanding and sharing the experiences and emotions of disease. And so I was a little late in coming on that part. And I think I replaced it with Beefeater's martinis, a couple in the evening, which I should never have done. It's the poison. But I did it. And but then there were some friends. My brother Bob was extremely helpful along the way. Once I began to realize I can't do this by myself, and once I began to realize my goal is helping Elaine live her best life possible. And what are the things I need to do that? Well, to keep myself from going out of my mind is one of the ways, and I do that, as I said, through my brother and so forth. And we are not very far along in creating dementia-friendly places. And that's why what the churches are doing here and your participation is so important, because it's beginning to get a foothold in helping us create more dementia-friendly situations.
After Elaine became ill, back to a day that was just wonderful that you spent with her, and what were the things, the catalysts that made that happen?
Okay, can I think of things that were absolutely wonderful and what made that happen? It's going to be a two-part answer. When the doctor diagnosed Elaine, there said 4 things that we should be doing. Namenda and Aricept, I don't know if they work, but they're supposed to delay the symptoms, but the psychiatrist said do it, so we did it. I don't know if they work. Socialization, and then walking, which is the best exercise for the brain, and then a glass of red wine every evening. So Elaine got 4 weeks ahead with the glass of red wine every evening and 3 weeks behind in the walking. But here is the thing. I mentioned that I was Martin, the husband. Martin, the husband, taking his wife for a walk is a half an hour. So we would be walking along, and Elaine would say, look at that beautiful flower. Come on, Elaine, we have to get our walk in. Or we'd be walking along, and then a bird would be, Elaine, listen to, she would say, listen to, no, we've got to keep on going. And so those were moments that I look back on that I am so angry with myself that I missed out on those moments of joy. What were some of the highlights? You said, what was one of the best things? When I realized that, and we went for the next walk. And she said, look at that beautiful flower, and we shared that moment together. And when she looked at a bird, heard a bird singing, and we stopped and we listened to it together, so our hearts could touch. And as I said, hearts can touch by holding a hand, by giving a hug, by watching the leaves roll across the lawn, looking at a pretty flower, listening to the music. And you know, we become so entwined and tied up within ourselves about this. If we let go, I think, just a little bit and understand and appreciate the moments, it can add so much. And I think about, here's what I think. I think about with Elaine in assisted living, watching the leaves roll across the lawn, and here we are sitting looking out the window. And I'm saying, okay, assume Elaine would be well, and I would maybe have some resources. We maybe go into Switzerland and would sit and look at the Swiss Alps. And I'm saying, well, wait a minute. We probably would get the same feeling of oneness here as we would in the Swiss Alps. We don't have to spend 7 hours on an airplane. We don't have to worry about being, getting all kinds of challenges of how we're going to handle the travel. We can have as much heartwarming experience here as we can there. And so we've got to look for those opportunities. And we'll find them. I know we will. I know that.
Other questions? Other questions? Yeah.
So I read the book, and I can't remember if Elaine ever got angry, but my mom is 98, and she has dementia, just beginning parts of it. She gets these paranoia stories, and I don't know how to dissuade her from it. So I ask her questions, and I try to tell her that it's not true. I mean, some of them are really bad. Do you have any, suggestions for that?
The question is, if our loved one is coming up with things that aren't necessarily true, how do we handle it? One of the things first of all, I want to point out, in the back of the book is a 24/7 hotline for the Alzheimer's Association. In Wisconsin, there is what is called the Aging and Disability Resource Center. I would believe certainly you have something like that here in Minnesota. So there could be better people and better resources to answer that question than what my answer would be. But I think the first rule of thought is to join her world. And if she's worried about something, yes, I can understand why you would be worried about that. What are some of the what are some of the feelings that you have, or what are some of the thoughts that make you feel that way? But in my judgment, again, I'm not the psychiatrist, but I wouldn't argue with her about whether it's true or not. It's more why joining her world and following wherever her thoughts or her communication might lead you. That would be my thinking. And if anybody else has any thoughts or ideas on some of these questions or answers, please don't hesitate.
Well, what a gift so far. So we want to make sure that we capitalize on his generosity of answering our questions. So feel free and encouraged to be brave if something emerges for you.
One of the reasons I asked you that question at the beginning is I was thinking about a man I worked with. He was in his late 80s when I first met with him. It's part of a visitation ministry at my church. His wife was in memory care. She had Alzheimer's. And as I talked to him, I realized that he had some hesitancy about talking about his wife's situation. I mean, I can relate stories to you when he did talk to me about him. But what I found out is that he was very receptive about talking about things that are normal in his day and things that he remembers doing. He liked gardening. He went on trips with his wife. Things that resonated with normality in his life so he can retain some sanity, if you will. His wife didn't know that he was visiting with him one time and said, well, my husband's going to bring some cookies. He was sitting right next to her. And so when I asked you that question, I was thinking, I guess in essence, how did you keep your sanity?
The question was, how could I possibly have lost for governor in Wisconsin in 1978? How did I keep my sanity? Sometimes I didn't. I mean, I'm not that it got completely off the rails, but make no mistake about it, caregiving is one of the toughest jobs you can ever imagine. And we've got to understand that right up front. And then we have to understand that we can establish realizable goals, but it can become so frustrating. I did have a bit of time with a mentor, and his wife had passed away, and so I did give him a call. I said, do you ever just feel like screaming? Just feel like screaming. He says, not only did I just feel like screaming, but I screamed. And so we have to understand that those emotions are deep, and acknowledge them, and because of that, follow through with maybe a support group, or follow through with counseling, or follow through with discussing something with a friend, so that you can get that kind of emotion out. Now, another question that we get a lot is, what could a friend of a caregiver and a person with Alzheimer's do? As a friend, the first thing I think you can do is simply acknowledge that you know that it's a tough journey. That's like soothing aloe on a sunburn. So very important. But then to say, call me if you need help, that will never happen, because we don't do that, we caregivers. But hey, I'm going to pick up your prescriptions, or I'm going to cut the lawn, or I'm going to make you a chicken casserole, or I'm going to do whatever. But specific kinds of things. Or I'm going to come over and visit with your loved one for a little bit of time so you can go for a walk, or just get a little respite. Specific kinds of things become so important. But then I also want to get to the point, remember about hearts touching. The fact that Pierre Angelou, the poet, says, I never remember, I may not remember what you said, but I will always remember how you made me feel. And believe me, I know that you can give a very positive feeling to someone who you think is not there. Kyle.
So my grandfather passed away from Alzheimer's, and he became non-communicative towards the end of his journey, but knowing him well, there seemed to be moments in his experience where his eyes would twinkle, or he'd just have the smallest little grin on the side of his mouth. Did you have experiences like that with your Elaine, where you knew that you were making a connection, even if she couldn't verbally or otherwise acknowledge it?
Were there moments where I felt Elaine and I were in really direct communication? Yes, there were, Patsy Cline music. Oh gosh, I used to sing Patsy Cline music to her, and I could tell that was something special. Also holding a hand, and yeah, there were moments. And again, I mentioned, looking at the flower, listening to the bird. We got to look for those, and they're there. I know that.
How many more questions would you like to field? Or
Well, if there's no more questions, we won't field anymore.
all right, well, let's see. Right? Thank you.
So
I'm learning a lot as a professional public
we
speaker
will-
myself.
As Kyle mentioned, the price of the book is $15, and it does not include sales tax if you don't tell your governor, okay? Anyway, go ahead. There's a question.
Yeah, not so much a question, but I gotta say, I'm really sick of chicken casserole. Anyway, I gotta go home and make some after I'm done here. So, I don't have any of the issues that you're talking about with Alzheimer's and stuff like that, but I do wonder sometimes if I have it, because I can't think of words. Ramona and I sit in church and keep trying to remember things. So she writes them down. It comes to me after I'm done talking to her. So anyway, I just found out, I've been going to counseling for years and years and years, and I did artwork and traded all my artwork for counseling because they're so darned expensive. Anyway, what I learned is that I have to take care of myself, and that's really important. There's a couple of books that I read. One was, I was told by my counselor to buy and read, and it's called Don't Shoot the Dog.
Say that, put the microphone closer so everyone can hear it.
Don't shoot the dog.
Don't shoot the star.
Dog. Don't shoot the dog. It's a dog training
Don't shoot the dog.
book.
Thank you.
Don't shoot the dog.
Let me just tell you what I know about hearing aids. You have to keep them charged, but you have to put them in your ear.
Yeah.
When they're in the car.
I've already learned that. Anyway, I read through that whole thing, and I went to my counselor and I said, "Why are you having me read this book? I can't train my dog to do anything." Anyway, the message was you got to stay positive and keep working at it. So
You have to stay positive. Yes, I agree with you. And you and I both agree it's a lot easier said than done, but that's it. And that's why to set up realizable goals becomes so important. So thank you for that.
Okay. I just want to acknowledge that it's just a couple minutes past 3, and eventually we'll have to stop our live stream. But as long as the governor's willing to take questions, we'll keep that rolling.
And also we'll be signing books over there, so if you have something special we can visit a little bit then too. Yes, hi.
The question is, what happens to the caregiver, what do you go through when the Alzheimer's patient dies? Is it different than if they hadn't had Alzheimer's? I mean, it sounds like a very unique time.
All right, the question is how did I feel at the time of Elaine's passing? Well, certainly I lost my loved one, but I was relieved because I could not ask her to go on for another minute based on her quality of life and her inability to help herself in any way. And there's what I call the pivot, and there's 2 pivots in the life of a person, I believe, with Alzheimer's. When they enter their own world completely, not worried about Marty not keeping her captive, but she's in her own world. That's the first pivot. The second pivot, by the grace of God, when after losing all of her facilities, faculties, she passes away. And yes, I mourned her passing, but by the same token, I couldn't ask her to stay for another moment. So,
Please join me in giving Marty, Governor Schreiber, the biggest round of applause.
thank you.
A heartfelt thank you to him and his grandson Jordan, and to the Legacy, Nativity, Bethlehem, and Mental Health Connect, and to all of you wonderful people for joining us in person and online. Please get your book, get it signed, continue the conversation. There's resources from the Alzheimer's Association and Mental Health Connect as well. One more round of applause, please.